From the very start of royal history, kings have felt entitled to indulge in extramarital affairs, a practice often tolerated and even expected in the context of dynastic alliances and the need for male heirs. However, that didn't make it any easier for their wives to endure the sting of betrayal. Catherine of Aragon was no exception. Married for just a year to Henry VIII, Catherine was already facing rumours that her husband had taken a mistress in 1510, right as she was expecting their first child. It was a blow that set the tone for their tumultuous marriage, a foreshadowing of Henry's restless pursuit of pleasure. The woman at the heart of this first scandal was Lady Anne Stafford, a noblewoman with ties to the royal court. Despite being married herself, Anne caught Henry's wandering eye, and their affair, though brief, sparked chaos. When word reached Anne's brother, the Duke of Buckingham, he stormed to court, furiously demanding to know what business the king had with his sister. Henry, ever one to enjoy being called out, was forced to distance himself from Anne, and she was promptly packed off to a convent for a while to quell the gossip. Yet the damage was done. Catherine's trust had already taken a hit. Some argue that Henry's first mistress was Jane Poppincourt, a French woman who served as a lady-in-waiting. However, Jane's flirtation with Henry seemed more fleeting and less impactful on his marriage than the drama surrounding Anne Stafford. That's why Anne is often credited as the woman who truly shattered Catherine's illusions about her husband's fidelity. For Catherine, Anne Stafford's affair was a harsh awakening, a sign that her marriage would never be the devoted union she might have dreamed of. Instead, it would become a relentless battle against Henry's wandering heart, a pattern that would only become more pronounced over the years. Lady Anne Stafford, born in 1483, came from one of England's most prominent noble families, the youngest daughter of Henry Stafford, the second Duke of Buckingham, and Catherine Woodville. Anne's lineage was steeped in power and intrigue. Her father was executed in 1483 for rebelling against King Richard III, leaving the title to her older brother Edward. Her mother's ties to the Woodvilles made Anne a distant relation to King Henry VIII himself, as she was linked through Elizabeth Woodville, Henry's grandmother. This noble background placed Anne in the highest court circles, where her path eventually crossed with Henry's. At the time of her alleged affair with the king, Anne was recently married to George Hastings, who would later become the first Earl of Huntingdon in 1529. She was 26 years old, 8 years older than the king, and 2 years older than Queen Catherine. Anne and George were reportedly quite content in their marriage, no small feat for an arranged union in that era, and would go on to have 8 children together. However, this happiness didn't seem to shield Anne from the gossip swirling around the court. The rumours of Anne's affair with Henry emerged in 1510, just a year after Catherine and Henry's marriage. When the story broke, it stirred the court, especially since Henry's reaction was telling. He seemed unnerved, which only fanned the flames of speculation. Anne's brother, the Duke of Buckingham, was incensed, confronting her husband and demanding answers. Anne was sent to a convent for a brief period, ostensibly to quell the scandal. However, despite all the whispers and suspicions, there was never irrefutable proof of the affair, leaving the court in a state of shock and disbelief. As for her marriage, the impact of this rumour is difficult to gauge. Anne and George remained together, raising a large family, and there was no record of any lasting animosity between them. Perhaps they'd moved past the scandal, or maybe George knew that life at court came with such risks. What is certain is that Anne's entanglement with Henry is still debated today. Whether it was a genuine affair or simply the result of court gossip, we may never know. Nonetheless, it remains a fascinating chapter in the early years of Henry's reign, hinting at the wandering eye that would come to define his tumultuous marital history. An intriguing aspect of Henry VIII's early affairs is that, contrary to the typical pursuit of young maidens, the teenage king seemed drawn to older, experienced women. This might explain his fascination with Anne Stafford, who was 8 years his senior and on her second marriage when their rumoured affair began. This age difference and Anne's previous marital experience could have contributed to a more mature and complex relationship, challenging the traditional narrative of Henry's romantic pursuits. Yet, despite this exciting insight into Henry's preferences, the details of his entanglement with Anne still need to be discovered. We don't know precisely when or how the affair began, but the aftermath is well documented and it was nothing short of explosive. Word spread quickly through the court. Tensions reached a boiling point. Queen Catherine of Aragon was understandably devastated by her husband's infidelity, especially since Anne was one of her ladies-in-waiting. However, the most furious reaction came from Anne's brother, Edward Stafford, Duke of Buckingham. Furious at the disgrace brought upon his sister and their noble family, Edward felt the affair tarnished their reputation. The Stafford family, second only to the royal family in wealth and status, prided themselves on prestige. Edward, who believed himself to be the rightful heir to the throne through his Yorkist bloodline, saw this as an insult to his family's honour and even more proof that Henry was a usurper. The scandal's lasting impact on the Stafford family was a heavy burden, a weight of disgrace they had to carry. However, this treasonous belief would later lead to Edward's downfall, as he was executed for his ambitions in 1521. Adding further complexity to Anne's story was a rumoured relationship with another man, William Compton, a close friend of the king. While their affair was never proven, Compton left Anne a substantial inheritance in his will and requested that she be remembered in prayers after his death, hinting at a deep personal bond. As for Anne, it's unclear if she was indeed sent to a convent as a punishment for her alleged indiscretions, or if that's just a mix-up with another woman bearing the same name, leaving her fate shrouded in mystery and intrigue. The affair with Henry is believed to have fizzled out around 1513, possibly because Henry's attention had shifted to someone else. Anne returned to her life with George Hastings and they had 8 children together. Her later years were spent serving in the household of Henry's daughter Mary I before she passed away in 1544 at 61, a remarkable lifespan for a woman of her time. While Anne Stafford's life remains mysterious, her connection with Henry VIII reminds her of the volatile passions and tangled politics that defined the Tudor court. It is surprising how little we know about Anne Stafford, given that she's often considered Henry VIII's first mistress. While she doesn't enjoy the same notoriety as Bessie Blount or Mary Boleyn, her significance is undeniable as she sets the stage for Henry's pattern of infidelity. Perhaps it's the lack of scandalous proof, or simply that she was overshadowed by the more infamous women who followed, but her story remains a shadowy footnote in the king's love life. Anne's affair might have made Catherine of Aragon more cautious about trusting her ladies-in-waiting. After all, Henry would have found it most accessible to pursue women within his wife's household, where he had frequent and direct access. This betrayal must have stung, not only because of the infidelity, but because it came from someone within Catherine's inner circle. It likely made Catherine feel the fragility of her power as queen, recognising that her influence was always at risk in a court where a mistress could hold sway over the king's affections. This awareness was a cruel foreshadowing of the challenges she would face as Henry's eye wandered even more in the years to come. If you enjoyed this latest video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Click on the screen now to explore the untold stories and hidden secrets of another fascinating figure with a story to tell. Get ready to uncover more historical gems and intriguing royal tales. Your next adventure in history starts right here.